Kettering Health Hamilton is proud to be the broadcast sponsor of the Celebrating Self series. Kettering Health Hamilton, be your best.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Fitton Center for Creative Arts. My name is Ian Mackenzie Thurley. I'm the Executive Director here at the Fitton Center, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to beautiful downtown Hamilton, Ohio. It couldn't be a day where we wouldn't acknowledge our good friends from Two Women in a Kitchen. Thank you for looking after us all season long. They are incredible. They also do our Fitton Family Fridays. They look after all of our backstage crew and entertainers throughout the series or throughout the season to make sure we all get fed, particularly on a Saturday night. We've been here long and late, so we really do appreciate everything they do and in support of that. And of course, if you've got events here at the Fitton Center, do give them a call. They are great partners to have. I want to give a big shout out to our friends from Hamilton High School and the transitions team for being here again this season. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here. I know our audience and members do too. You're a big part of our family here at the Fitton Center, so thank you very much. And last and certainly not least, over here, our good friends from TV Hamilton. Thank you so much for your media sponsorship. They're going live today. That's in partnership with Kettering Health Hamilton. Steve, are you busy right there? Can I get you to step out for just 1 second? I've got somebody that's going to take over the reins for you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Steve Colwell. Say hello, Steve. Steve's usually behind that camera. The board of TV Hamilton have asked me to tell you that they are incredibly grateful for all the amazing work you do here in the community. They have just moved offices and studios, so they had that big studio over at the old city building, and now they've moved into the new city building, and downstairs they've got new digital access and doing great things. But if you've ever been to an event in Hamilton, you'll see Steve, Jeff working with us with the Vision Commission and the Chamber as well as his partner in crime. But Steve has been with TV Hamilton for a good many years now and an incredible community asset, and we really do appreciate it. I know your board does as too, but us at the Fitton Center and as a community member, thank you very much, Mr. Steve Colwell. As you can see, loves being in front of the camera, so he's happy to go right in there behind. As ever, Hamilton is made up of an incredible community. People ask me that all the time. Why, this is things happening in Hamilton, and this is happening, and success there. And I go back to one word, and that is community. We have great leadership, we have great city leadership and city management, but all of that itself is based out of the community over many years and people getting involved and being engaged in the city. And as I was saying to someone last night, if somebody's digging a hole and you tell them like, well, I've got an extra shovel, come and dig the hole with me. Doesn't matter how long you've been here or how long you're staying, there's an invitation to get involved in this community. So, and with that, we have some quirks, some idiosyncrasies. We've had some characters come out of this city, great and small. We're going to talk a little bit about that next season. We're going to talk about the great music of Hamilton coming through. But for many years, as I've driven past Sims Park, we have seen a great piece of sculpture. And I'd heard things and rumors and stuff, and the mole people and the journey to the center of the earth, and I didn't think that was true. But it is. And if you go into things like Atlas Obscura, you will see things about the Hollow Earth Fest and crazy things about blue babies coming out of eggshells. I don't know what that's all about, but I'm sure at some point there will be a Celebrating Self, I hope, that I'm not invited to. But that's what makes this city interesting, makes it lots of fun, and with a great and interesting and varied history. But one of the things we've always liked to explore here at Celebrating Self as part of the Fitton Center are things that we don't know about, or things that we see in plain sight every day that we still don't know about. We'd like to know a little more. So coming up very soon, you'll hear about that, is the Hollow Earth Festival, right up there on South 3rd Street at Sims Park. But wanted to know a little bit more about the man himself and about this piece of sculpture. and the Hollow Earth Society. So I am very, very pleased to welcome to the stage. We have two gentlemen, two speakers today, one from Hamilton High School. He is originally from Buffalo, which is awesome because he was given every opportunity in his life to be a Buffalo Bills fan, but chose to be a Steelers fan. So right? Yeah, you're getting nothing from me, bud. But also teaches a class at the Hamilton Freshman School on Hamilton history. So we have our young people taking a class dedicated to the history of Hamilton. You'll see every week he invites in community members. I get to be one of those representing the arts, but from city government, from leadership around the town, to really to delve into the history of our city, which is absolutely fantastic for our young people. And then we also have a representative from the Hamilton Lane Library. So I'm going to introduce you first to Mr. Christopher Marichello from Hamilton City Schools, and he'll be joined on stage very soon by his partner in history and crime, Mr. Brad Spurlock. We're going to talk a little bit about the journey to the center of the earth. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here. I get a day off from school, I get a free meal, and I get to talk about history. What can't be better? Thanks for everyone for coming. It's really nice to see a lot of familiar faces and friends. Thank you, Ian, and the Fitton Center and the staff for inviting Brad and I today to talk about a very interesting man and his very bizarre theory about the earth. Special thanks to Kathy Klink, who always makes me an offer I can't refuse, and Andy Weltzer for sponsoring. When Ian contacted me about coming to present last year, I thought he was joking. I'm like, is this April Fool's joke or something? And I saw it was April 2nd, we were presenting and said, maybe you should have had it on April 1st. But all seriousness, we're happy to be here and present the last Celebrating Self. I've been a historian for over 40 years now and been teaching in Hamilton for 31 years. And I've really come to believe that all history is local. And the best history of all, I think, is biography. Several years ago, not several years ago, but not too long ago, Doris Kearns Goodwin spoke in Hamilton, famous biographer of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson. And she talked about how when she was researching her biographies, she really felt like she knew the people intimately. She lived with these people for months and years doing the research. And recently, and I saw some of you there, Kai Bird, the Pulitzer Prize winning biographer of J. Robert Oppenheimer, talked about how biography really makes history accessible. And I truly believe that. And I personally experienced this myself 35 years ago when I wrote a biography of Wallace P. Raudebush, who, if you're a Miami alumnus, you know the name. I felt like I was living with Raudebush for a year and a half. Now to Sims. When we started our Hollow Earth Festival, I didn't really know much about Sims. I knew the name, I knew about the monument, but I really didn't know much about him as a person. So when I discovered, happily, that Sims literally walked and fought on the ground in Western New York, where I was born and raised, it really enhanced both my affinity and admiration for the man, despite his nutty theory. So in my part of the program, I'm going to talk to you about Captain Sims the man, and Brad will talk about Sims's eccentric theory and its influences and historical legacy, and we'll take questions. My first question for you is, how many of you have ever heard of John Cleve Sims? Okay. How many of you ever heard of the Hollow Earth theory? How many of you ever visited the monument in Sims Ludlow Park. Okay. So let's talk about his background. This is an interesting drawing because the author is someone who most of you are familiar with, John James Audubon. And this was done in 1820 in Cincinnati. It's the only known representation we have of Captain Sims. Pedigree. When I started doing research on Sims, one of the things that struck me was his pedigree, his family background, which can be traced all the way back to good old Canterbury, England, home of the famous Tales by Chaucer. And his earliest ancestor we know came to America, part of the Great Migration to Massachusetts Bay in the early 1600s. Another one of his relatives was a Harvard graduate, another minister, and his father was a New Jersey judge. Sims himself was born in New Jersey. Now, if you're really interested in this topic about New Jersey, and I'm from New York, so I have a hard time talking about New Jersey. But I'm going to be talking about Hamilton and the New Jersey connection next month at the Butler County Historical Society. Now, of all the Sims relatives, John Cleave Sims, who John Cleave Sims Jr. is named after, is probably the most famous. Now, here's what's confusing. John Cleave Sims Jr. is not the son of John Cleave Sims. He's the nephew of John Cleave Sims. So, John Cleave Sims, I really think we could do a whole program about him, and a book could be written about him because of all the things that he was involved in, including really owning the land where we're standing right now. A guy that the more I think about him, I think about he must have rubbed off on his nephew. Men were really bad with money, and they had problems with money all their lives. Another famous relative, you might recognize the guy on the future President William Henry Harrison. So Sims, when I think about him, I think about a military man. He's a military man. We know him as Captain Sims. He started his military career in 1802 and served in a lot of different places. Really, he was all over the place. Everywhere from New Jersey to what we call the old Southwest, New Orleans, Missouri Territory, and this is at a time pre-Lewis and Clark. So some of the places where Sims was stationed. I don't know what it is about duels in Hamilton, but while he was stationed at Fort Adams, Sims got in a duel with a fellow officer over something that was really pretty trivial. And a lot of those duels in those days, it was always something trivial. And it was very interesting. If you ever read the letter that Sims wrote to his brother, Celadon Sims, and those of you who are familiar with Fairfield, Celadon Avenue is named after Celadon Sims. So the letter is really interesting because he describes in great detail, it's almost a literary masterpiece reading the letter, what happened in the duel. And I just quoted a small part of it, but I thought it was funny, just the language. People don't talk like this anymore, And I was around to Orleans, where a viper-like enemy had been before me and made several others who were actuated by hope of promotion and the love of mischief. Just love that language. But what's interesting is, so in the duel, both men are injured permanently. Captain Marshall, or Lieutenant Marshall, rather, was permanently injured, and Sims, his wrist was permanently injured. But what I really think was interesting is that the rest of his life, he always regretted this. He spoke with regret about the duel and later became friends with Lieutenant Marshall. So again, that sort of reveals something about his character. That he would have this fiery temper to get into a duel, but then he would forgive the person and be friends with him. Also, while he was at Fort Adams, he was married. And he married a widow of a fellow officer and inherited a large family from her, and then had several other children. So Captain Sims had lots of kids, most of whom he couldn't support, but he still did. He tried his best. So when the War of 1812 starts, and really, in terms of his military career, this war really defines Sims. He was the senior captain at Fort Bellefontaine, which was here at the mouth of the Missouri River. All right, so now we take the story to my stomping grounds, where I was born and raised, the Niagara Frontier. So the map on the left shows you the Niagara Frontier, so it refers to the area north of Buffalo, going towards Lake Ontario, including Niagara Falls. And he was ordered to report to General Jacob Brown, who was the commander of the armies on the Niagara Frontier. So if you go to the monument, Sims's monument, two battles are listed: the Battle of Lundy's Lane and the Battle of Fort Erie. Lundy's Lane was probably the worst battle, one of the worst battles in the War of 1812 in terms of casualties, both sides. And this was the second failed attempt to invade Canada. We wanted to make it the 19th state at that point. So what the current president's doing is really, it's old news. It really is old news. So there's Lundy's Lane. All right, so one of the other people that Sims encounters in the War of 1812 at Lundy's Lane is Phil Scott. So those of you who are history buffs, you might know that Scott becomes the hero of the Mexican-American War, later on becomes the commander-in-chief of the whole army at the start of the American Civil War. So one of the things that's really interesting about Sims is some of the famous people he rubs up with in his career. All right, so after Lundy's Lane, a lot of casualties, and so Sims is part of the army that is moved to the town that I was actually born and raised in, Williamsville, New York. Most famous is the home of Ron Gronkowski, the football player from the former Patriots football player. So Sims was literally where I grew up. So that's the British General Ryle who was captured. He was there. So basically the whole army was camped in the village I was born in. And so Sims, walked the grounds where I was born and raised. So I just think it's just sort of ironic that here I am in Ohio, Sims, and being from New York and how we're connected. All right, so the Battle of Fort Erie, this is the other battle that's listed on Sims's monument. So Fort Erie, where I actually summered as a kid, is directly across from Buffalo. And so the had a fort there, and General Brown attacked it. And this is where Sims really gets recognized. And I love this, that he captures one of the batteries, and I can just see him leading his men over the trenches and spiking the first cannon with his own hands. So, this is a man of action. And, okay, so I had to put that slide on there on the right to appease Ian. So I'm not totally a Bills hater there. All right. All right, so after the War of 1812, Sims retired. So 1816, he retires, and he goes to Missouri. All right, so again, he's familiar with this part of the country. That's where he had started his military career, out west, as we would call it back then. And so he got a job working as a supplier to the army out there, but also trading with the Fox Indians. And it's interesting because he got his trading license from none other than William Clark of William and Clark fame. Somebody who we think probably spent some time at Fort Hamilton as part of Anthony Wayne's army during the 1790s. Their Hamilton connection to this story. So I think another part of this is that Sims, his reputation was for being very fair. You know, at a time when a lot of these traders were shady and dishonest, Sims was always very fair in dealing with the Indians. So I guess probably because of his large family, his financial situation was always precarious. And so he wasn't making enough money in St. Louis. So he decides to move back east, and he settles in Newport in 1819. And that's where he stayed until 1824. So it's this point that his theory had come out, and most of his income was generated, we think, from lecturing on the hollow earth theory. It's amazing people do that, but. So Sims moved to Hamilton in 1824, and Brad talking about this, we think that he settled on land that was actually given to him by his uncle, John Cleve Sims, and we think it was probably somewhere in what's today the north end of Hamilton. So I guess probably because of the rigors of military life, his health was not that good, and a lot of it was made worse by the fact he traveled around a lot to lecture on his theory. Even went to places like, ironically enough, Canada to lecture. And so he goes back to New Jersey to hopefully recuperate his health. I guess he needed to be to the Jersey Shore or something for the sun. And but anyways, it didn't really work. And so in 1829, January, he leaves to come back to Hamilton. And on the way, he got so sick, he had to be transported to Hamilton in a bed, put on a wagon. And so he declines in health, and to the point where he in May 29th, 1829, and he's buried in what was the original Hamilton Cemetery, land that had been donated by another guy from New Jersey, Israel Ludlow. So if you want to know more about Ludlow, he's one of the people we're honoring at the Hollow Earth Festival. He's really the founder of Hamilton, Israel Ludlow. So Sims was buried in that park with full military honors. And several years later, his son and acolyte, Americus Sims, great name, I just love that name, Americus Sims, had the current monument built over his father's remains. Here's some old postcards showing what it looked like before it was propped up on a cement plinth and surrounded by an ugly fence, but that's where it looked like. So it's interesting if you look at the plaque on the monument, it actually mentions his military career and the battles of Lundy's Lane and Fort Erie. And I think when I was doing the research, this quote really hits me. It says a lot. And I believe this was written by James McBride, who Brad will talk about a little bit more later. But I want to read it because I think it kind of sums up how I feel about the man. Captain Sims was a man of great simplicity and earnestness of character, a high-minded, honorable, honest, and exemplary man in every walk of life, and was beloved, trusted, and respected by all who knew him. So fixed in his mind was the belief of the truth of his theory that for 10 years, although laboring under great pecuniary embarrassments and buffeted by the ridicule and sarcasm of an opposing world, he persevered. He persevered. in his endeavors to interest others in it, so as to enable him to test its truth by a polar expedition, but without success. This says a lot about the guy. And I think, one of the reasons why we started our festival was to honor Hamilton visionaries, people who they're willing to take the risks. They're willing to put things out there, even if it leads to that kind of embarrassment and ridicule. All right, so now Brad will tell you about the theory and its legacy.
First of all, thank you very much for having me here to speak today. And thank you, Chris, for the biography of Sims. I hope that now that you know a little bit about the man, it helps understand why he talked about some of these theories and made some of the moves that he made to be a proponent of these theories. So to start with, Sims was not the first person to propose a hollow earth. The first notable proposal was made in 1692 by Edmund Halley of Halley's Comet fame. However, this theory was disproved in 1749 following a 1738 experiment. And I apologize, I do not speak French. Peter Bouguer. Now, Sims' theory was unique in that he proposed that there were layers to the Earth made up of concentric spheres, and that there were openings at the North and South Pole that were referred to as Sims holes. He also said that the Earth was inhabitable within, and that there was a river running through the center of it, which he referred to as the Sims River, and that the center of the Earth was populated by flora and fauna. He also referred to the interior of the Earth as Simsonia. So he first proposed his theory while he was living in St. Louis in 1818, and that was undertaken in the form of a circular. And this circular he passed out by hand, but also mailed to every academic institution in the United States, and some in Europe as well. And this is a picture taken from the internet of the actual circular, one copy of it that was passed around. There is a quote that says, "The reception of this circular met with was that of ridicule, it being looked upon as the production of a distempered imagination or the ravings of partial insanity." So despite this, Sims continued to publish his circulars and started a lecture tour. The first lecture in that tour was held actually in Cincinnati in 1820. That was followed by lectures in Lexington, Kentucky, Frankfort, Kentucky, here in Hamilton, and in Zanesville, Ohio. So we were on his very first lecture circuit here in Hamilton, even before he lived here. Now, not only did he make this proposal and try to convince all these academics of its validity, he also wanted to have expeditions to the North and South Pole in order to try to prove his theory correct. And he desired that this be government-sponsored. And he was once quoted as saying, "I pledge my life in support of this truth and am ready to explore this hollow if the world will support and aid me in the undertaking," because he was broke. There was one measure that was proposed by a senator from Kentucky in 1822 that was passed off to a foreign relations committee at the federal government level, and there it died. There were two additional petitions for polar expeditions sponsored by the United States government in 1823, both of which were permanently tabled. And finding no luck with the federal government, he went to the Ohio General Assembly in January of 1824, and once again, it was permanently tabled there as well. So he was never successful in getting his polar expedition that he so sought. Now, his theory itself was actually never published during his lifetime. It was only through the circulars and through his word of mouth and his lectures that people knew about his theory. However, it was published after his death by James McBride, who you see on the screen right here. Now, McBride did not put his name on this publication. He published it anonymously. But it was based on all of the theories that he had clearly had an intimate knowledge of in personally dealing with Sims. So this is the closest publication that shows his exact feelings on the topic that exists. It was published as a citizen of the United States as the author, if that says anything. So this publication was actually pretty widely circulated at the time, and it led to several other publications that came about that were also proponents of the Hollow Earth theory proposed by Sims specifically. Again, despite the fact that this was disproved before it was proposed, Thomas J. Matthews published a lecture in Cincinnati in 1824. He was an early proponent. Another was Alexander Mitchell, who published his in Eaton, Ohio in 1826, so again, very close to us in Hamilton. And then the most notable proponent was Jeremiah N. Reynolds. And he lectured extensively on the theory and published his books and also in academic publications on the Hollow Earth theory. And then lastly, also, America's Sims, much, much later. So all this publication and stuff is done primarily in the 1820s. In 1878, America's Sims revives this with his publication. And here's a copy from the Cummins Local History Room at the Lane Public Library, where again, he's trying to reinvigorate interest in the Hollow Earth theory and also in his father's memory. So, this is clearly not a scientific theory that's accepted academically, though he did get one thing right, and that is that the Earth is made up of layers, which is part of his theory. So that's about the only thing from his theories that is accurate, but it did lead to several fiction work. In fact, Simsonia, Voyage of Discovery, it was anonymously published on November 2nd of 1820. However, literary experts think that it was a guy named Nathaniel Ames that was the true author of this work. That was the very first American fiction book ever published, and it was based on Sims' theory of Hollow Earth. And in this book, the main character, whose name is Captain Seaborn, he leads a crew on a voyage to the South Pole in an attempt to prove Sims' theory, and results in them finding a lush land with inhabitants willing to trade with them that they also are looking to colonize on the interior of the Earth. A 1824 literary review called the book, upon the whole, dull and uninteresting. However, there was a more notable influence, Edgar Allan Poe. His only novel ever written, which was called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, references Sims' Hollow Earth theory, and it's 1838 is when it was published, and it has themes that are related to the work of J.N. Reynolds, who I mentioned before as the most notable proponent of the Hollow Earth theory. There's also a lot of other media that came about, and classics, all the works of Jules Verne. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is an exploration work. And then also it made it into film. Journey to the Center of the Earth, The Mole People from the 1950s. There'll be a showing of that actually as part of the build-up for Hollow Earth Fest this year, if anybody's interested in attending. Then there was also a series of comics called Polycador by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and then also the recent Godzilla movies, all reference Hollow Earth theories. Now, as far as the park is concerned, so John Cleave Sims Jr. is buried there still. The Hollow Earth Monument is not only a monument to Hollow Earth, it is also his gravestone, grave marker. We, year's Hollow Earth Fest, actually found out that there are at least 2 other burials that are still in that park. It was Paul and Mary Bunnell. He was a Revolutionary War and War of 1812 veteran. So as part of last year's festival, we were able to find his graves. Zach Kramer, who's a Eagle Scout now, did that for his Eagle Scout project, and we were able to build a bench and put a sign to commemorate their graves. But that was originally, there was a fort cemetery, but it was the original pioneer cemetery for the town of Hamilton, was in 4th Ward Park, also known as Ludlow Park, also known as Sims Park at various times. The park was originally part of several lots when the town was developed by Israel Ludlow, who is one of our honorees at this year's Hollow Earth Fest, as Chris noted, the founder of Hamilton, Dayton, and Cincinnati. It was eventually donated in 1813 to the town of Hamilton for use as a graveyard, and burials commenced in there starting at that time. The cemetery was referred to as the Hamilton Burying Grounds. And then with the creation of Greenwood Cemetery in 1848, the remains of the early pioneers of Hamilton started to be removed from there and relocated to Greenwood Cemetery. And that went on throughout the 1850s. As I said, there are at least 3 people that are still buried there. It would not surprise me if there were many more that were also still buried there. With the construction of the Junction Railroad in the 1850s, which is the railroad line that leads to Oxford from Hamilton, it cut across a corner of the park, and it was really converted into a park following the removal of all the graves in the 1840s, and it has pretty much served as a park ever since. There was a wading pool that was there in the 1950s, if anybody remembers that, and a lot of the children from that neighborhood have grown up for generations going to that park for recreation. The sculpture, the Hollow Earth Monument that is there, restored in 1991. That restoration was paid for by Historic Hamilton, Inc., which is still around and active, historic preservation organization. And it was done by noted sculptor Edgar Tarfur, who also lived in Hamilton. And with that, I'd invite Chris back up, and then questions you might have on either the theory or Sims himself.
Do we have any questions for the Hollow Earth team? Stunned into silence right at the front. Somebody with an eloquent view of this particular monument.
I know you said he didn't have any scientific, but why did he believe in this theory? I mean, is there any information on that?
That is a great question. One of the things that I did notice, though, in the research I was doing about him is he had at a young age, had an early aptitude for mathematics and natural sciences. So, but it's perplexing how somebody who was arguably fairly well educated could believe this. And I don't know. I mean, that's what I said. I don't know. It's a great question.
Oftentimes the whys of history are lost.
So he never said because.
In none of the stuff that was left behind, none of it stated why he believed in this theory or why he became acquainted with it.
All right. Another one for you at the front.
Great presentation. Did any of his children continue his theory, his studies? What did they go on to do?
Well, yeah. So Americus Sims was the chief, I guess, standard bearer of his legacy. That he built the monument several years after, almost 50 years after Sims died. He built the monument, and that you have the book. Where's the book? Yeah. And so his son, reissued the theory. So still trying to keep it alive. So, yeah. Americus Sims would be the one.
Yeah. And I might also add that Americus Sims ended up having to sell most of the land that the family owned, which is now Hamilton's 4th ward, to pay off his father's debts.
I've got one for you in the middle here.
Which Sims was the namesake of Sims Avenue, Sims Road, Sims Corner, Sims Tavern?
That would be John Cleve Sims, the uncle.
Yeah.
Who's buried again, someone who had pecuniary embarrassments, but he's a really fascinating character. In terms of his pedigree, I mean, he was in Continental Congress. He was in the Revolutionary War, and he's the one that purchased became known as the Sims Purchase, of the Miami Purchase. Thousands and thousands of acres of land between the two rivers. But then he got involved in a lot of, let's just say he was not good with record keeping, and sold land that didn't belong to him, and he ended up in North Bend, and that's where he's buried, near his son-in-law, the president. But this must be a family history of financial irregularities and mismanagement. Passed it on to his nephew.
One right here.
I have a background in mathematics, and part of the description of him was he was a Hamilton polymath. Do you know what a polymath
No,
is?
that's referring to James McBride, who could be a subject of a whole nother talk. McBride, anybody who went to Miami University, it's interesting because McBride Hall is very close to Sims Hall, both named after these two. And McBride was very influential he's Hamilton's first mayor, and influential in so many activities, the first bridge, and what else, the canals and toll roads and archaeological stuff. He's the one that did the stuff with the mounds over in Pyramid Hill. So he was very well at that. Brad and I have had these conversations, and I think now I understand why McBride published his stuff anonymously, because he was a self-educated man. Polymath is somebody who's pretty much self-educated and knows lots of stuff about lots of stuff, and that's how McBride he had his finger in almost everything. I think he did the first map of Hamilton too. So just a whole bunch of stuff, and that's why I'm like, how would this guy who was smart, how would he publish this theory that's ridiculous? But he was he stayed loyal to Sims.
So I'm a monomath.
Yeah. Well,
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, he wanted to know how much of it's touched on today's classroom. So I teach it, as part of my Hamilton history class, and so I don't know if you know, part of my pedigree was I was Jim Blunt's student teacher, so I feel like I've got to keep it moving here. And I remember he told me about it, and I was like, okay. But yeah, we talk about it. I mean, and we talk about the park, we talk about the monument, we talk about Sims. But it's very interesting, because when we were starting this Hollow Earth Fest last year, and we were getting people saying, "You guys believe that stuff?" Yeah, we believe it.
So one right up the back.
Yeah.
Considering the time, the Frenchman who disproved his theory, what mechanism did he use to disprove it?
We're historians, not scientists.
Well, historians usually have a lot of names for a lot of things.
Yeah, I don't know.
Coming up the front. I'm going to Kathy Klink because her name's on the top of the jar. Sorry, Cheryl. There we go.
Help me understand one more time what you said about Edgar Tafur and the sculpture. What was his role again? I didn't quite catch
So
that.
Historic Hamilton, Inc.
Yeah.
commissioned him to restore the monument in 1991. So it was removed, taken to his workshop, and he did some restoration work on it, and then it was reinstalled in the park.
Got it. Thank you.
But so if you look at the pictures of the original, it was on the ground, and so they raised it up, and then they also installed the what is it, copper or brass plaques that just basically replicate the wording that's on the stone, because I think it's limestone, and it's in a really bad state of deterioration, we think. But that's one of the reasons for the Hollow Earth Festival is we want to look at the possibility of doing a restoration that'll preserve it for another 100 years, because the elements have definitely taken its toll on it.
Can I come in here and I'll do this table?
At about 20 years ago, I was working in Nashville, and I went over to go through Jackson's estate, Andrew Jackson's estate, the Hermitage. There is a John Cleve Sims buried in the family cemetery. And someone there told me he was married to Jackson's niece. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I've no. It's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah. There's a grave there with his name on it. So I'm wondering how many John Cleve Sims are there?
Lots.
He probably named a few after himself, it sounds like. He was looking for a name.
Well, I'm still optimistic, because when you think Aristotle first, I believe, I might be wrong, thought that the earth was round, and it was a long time before they actually proved the world was round. So maybe there's still time to prove his theory.
This is coming from someone from Australia.
There's a short way home, I can tell you.
Cut her off, Ian.
Be cheaper than Qantas. I have a question. Obviously, the Hollow Earth Festival is celebrating all things Hamilton and fun and interesting, but at his time here in Hamilton in those years coming past, how was he received here in Hamilton, in his hometown, with all of these theories and things going on?
Well, it seems like there was a pretty good number of people who were listening to his theories here. I mean, if he did one of his early lecture tours, came to live here, chose to live here, and then also had McBride publish his work, I would think that this probably was a pretty good stronghold of believers in his concept at the time.
Well, lots of his family, they were all still here too.
Yeah.
Someone was talking about Sims Corner. That was all land that was owned by the family.
It's also worth noting that his immediate family actually did reside in Hamilton while he was on his lecture tour throughout the East Coast and such.
And I notice you've got the details up of the Hollow Earth Fest. You want to talk a little bit about the Hollow Earth Fest for this year and how it's come about and how people can support it? What goes on?
Okay, so the Hollow Earth Fest this year is April 26th from 12 to 6 at Sims Park. And Kat Steele has some things she's going to pass out if you're interested. We expanded a little bit. So part of the kind of the vision of the festival was, to highlight the park, number one, but number two, to celebrate both veterans, Hamilton veterans and Hamilton visionaries. So last year we honored, who was our, Paul Bunnell, yeah, so the Revolutionary War soldier that's buried in the park with his wife Mary, and they're both from New Jersey. Yeah, there you go. See, you didn't think you were going to get away with that. So this year we're honoring Colonel Israel Ludlow, who is really, I think, again, if you get into some of these Hamilton history people, it's just you go down these rabbit holes and you just don't know where it's going to stop. And Ludlow is super interesting. In fact, one of the things I just learned about him recently was an article that Jim had written several years ago that I was reading, that the standard history is that when Arthur Sinclair came to this part of the world to be the governor of the Northwest Territory, he didn't like the name of Losantiville that was given to what's going to become Cincinnati. And so as a member of the Society of the Cincinnatus, which was a Revolutionary War fraternal organization, which George Washington was at one point president of, it was actually Ludlow that suggested to Sinclair that they change it to Cincinnati. Now, I don't know if Ludlow was himself a member of the Society of the Cincinnatus. I don't know. But Ludlow's career as a surveyor is incredible. I mean, he laid out Cincinnati, Dayton, and Hamilton. And one of the other things I just learned recently about Ludlow, so one of the things that's great about Hamilton is that it's easy to get around because it's like basically on a grid. Well, that grid was from Ludlow, and Ludlow was basically following the grid pattern of Philadelphia. So if you've ever been to Philadelphia, you know how Philadelphia is laid out. So really, we've got a lot of that East Coast influence here, New Jersey and Pennsylvania, right here in Hamilton.
And if you wanted to get some of that cool Hollow Earth swag that you're wearing, I see Jennifer's got a T-shirt over here.
Yes.
If they wanted to get some of that Hollow Earth swag to be repping over in Fairfield and telling them what for.
Yeah, you got me off track. So part of the Hollow Earth Festival, it's basically, food, music, honoring veterans. So besides Colonel Ludlow, we're honoring, was Private? Sergeant Michael Pop, who was from Hamilton. He was a tailor, and his claim to fame is he designed the famous Eisenhower jacket for General Eisenhower. Ooh. And so he's our veteran visionary. Our main sponsor, our main partner is the American Legion, who is obviously interested in our project because it's their front yard, like Miss Wilkes over here, your new front yard. So we're excited about it. We've got bands, food trucks, music, lots of stuff for kids. It's one of those great events where it's you can bring a family and your kids could be occupied, and you can drink donut beer from Municipal Brewery, and you can get cool shirts from Unsung Salvage. It's a great festival because it's all local. I mean, it's all Hamilton stuff. And so it's going to bring attention to the park. It's just going to be a nice spring party that, people are kind of tired of this crappy weather, and hopefully we won't have lots of rain like we're going to have today. But April 26th, if you're interested, we have sponsor opportunities. I'm not here to sell it. I just want you to come.
Brad, have you got anything else?
No, the only thing that I'll add is that we have a few events that are coming up before the festival also. So we're holding a trivia, Hamilton focused.
You guys, if it's Hollow Earth, you guys should all be experts in coming around now. So you've been listening.
Pinball Garage on April the 15th at 7. And then they're doing a parlor show at 3rd Street Music to support the festival on April 19th at 7 p.m. And there's going to be a movie showing of the Mole People at the Art Space. Don't miss that one. The day before the event on April the 25th at 7 p.m. And then, of course, Hollow Earth Fest itself is April 26th from noon to 6.
So it's like a whole week of crazy stuff. I mean, yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. Mr. Brad Spurlock, Mr. Chris Marichello, and you've had a journey to the center of the earth. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We really do appreciate it. Thank you for being here. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This has been our final Celebrating Self for this season, but we start again in September. I'll give you a little hint where get your turkey legs ready. We'll be starting with a Renaissance Fair right here on stage. There may be live jousting. I'm not entirely sure. But we'll see what we can do. But we've got an incredible series and an incredible season lined up for you. In fact, next week we start our sponsorship campaign. So if you'd like to see Ramona and you'd like to be a part of that, she will certainly take that phone call and that conversation. That brochure will be out next week. So we're revealing all that we've got for next season. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you very much to Kathy Klink, our series supporter, to our friends at TV Hamilton, and Two Women in the Kitchen. And thank you so much to you. We're going to see you again very soon. We have lots more to hear and do at the Fitton Center over the next 2 months. But it's been great to see you today. Have a wonderful afternoon. And once again, Chris Marichello, Brad Spurlock. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a lovely afternoon.
Kettering Health Hamilton is proud to be the broadcast sponsor of the Celebrating Self series. Kettering Health Hamilton, be your best.